How many times do you think the term Antichrist appears in the Bible? 25 times, maybe? 50 times? 100 times, perhaps? Surely it appears throughout Daniel, Revelation, and the writings of the Apostle Paul. And it can't be fewer than 5 times, right? Actually, the word Antichrist appears exactly 5 times in the entire Bible, in only 4 verses. Every occurrence is found in one of 2 short letters, 1st and 2nd John. Only one biblical writer ever uses the term. And perhaps most surprisingly, John never uses it in the biblical book most commonly associated with the Antichrist. What book am I talking about? The book of Revelation, of course. So where did our popular conception of the Antichrist come from? Does John describe one singular future world ruler, a particular kind of false teacher, a spiritual power, or all 3? To answer these questions, we need to set aside what we think the word means and examine how the Bible actually uses it. Antichristos means an adversary to the Messiah, according to BDAG, the Greek lexicon of the New Testament and early Christian literature. And it adds that this is someone who will appear in the last days. The problem with saying that, someone who will appear in the last days, is that everyone thinks that the last days are sometime in the future. But that isn't the case biblically. In fact, in the one New Testament passage where the term Antichrist is used most robustly, 1 John chapter 2, where 3 out of the 5 usages occur, it says explicitly that they, the people to whom 1 John was originally written, were living in the last hour. Not just the last day, but the last hour. The point is this: the phrase last days or the last hour is a reference to the entire age in between Christ's first and second coming. At least in the New Testament, that's what it is. Now, 1 John was probably written near the end of the 1st century, most likely around 85 to 90 AD, but almost certainly after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in 70 AD. Now, this is the full passage, 1 John chapter 2, verses 18 to 22, where the term antichristos or antichrist is used 3 times. Children, it is the last hour. And as you have heard that Antichrist is coming, so now many antichrists have come. Therefore, we know that it is the last hour. They went out from us, but they were not of us. For if they had been of us, they would have continued with us. But they went out that it might become plain that they are not all of us. Who is the liar but he who denies that Jesus is the Christ? This is the Antichrist, he who denies the Father and the Son. No one who denies the Son has the Father. Whoever confesses the Son has the Father also. Let what you heard from the beginning abide in you. Now, something very interesting is going on here. In verse 18, the term Antichrist is used as a singular noun without the definite article. Antichrist is coming, it says. It almost makes it seem like we're referring here to a type more than an individual. Then, in the same verse, antichristoi is used. This is the plural form of the noun. So now many antichrists have come. Now suddenly it seems like there are a plurality of antichrists. Then, 4 verses later, in the same passage, it says, the Antichrist, with the definite article, ha antichristos in Greek. So based on this, which is it? Is the Antichrist a specific person? Is it a type of person? Or are there antichrists running around everywhere? I think John's answer is that his readers had heard about a coming climactic opponent of Christ, but John actually wants them to understand that the same kind of opposition is already present in the world through false teachers. You see, John doesn't necessarily deny the future appearance of one final Antichrist. He acknowledges that what they heard is true. Antichrist is coming. But that's not where he places his pastoral emphasis. His point is essentially, you've heard that Antichrist is coming, but don't imagine that this danger belongs only to the future. Many antichrists have already come. In other words, the anticipated singular figure and the present plurality don't necessarily contradict one another. A final opponent may eventually embody the same rebellion that's already active through many deceivers. In fact, many church fathers believed that a final figure would arise shortly before Christ's return. And that's important to note. Church fathers such as Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, Tertullian, Hippolytus, Cyril of Jerusalem, John, Chrysostom, Jerome, and Augustine of Hippo all believed that a future Antichrist would arise shortly before Christ's second coming. But if we want to follow John's emphasis, we cannot become so consumed with identifying one future political leader that we ignore the false teaching John actually describes as Antichrist. Now remember that the definition of Antichrist that I shared earlier is an adversary to the Messiah. While it seems likely, or at least possible, that John had a future person in mind, it's not limited to an individual. It could be a person, it could be a group of people, an ideology, or even a movement. Anything that is an adversary to the Messiah and his ends is Antichrist. This becomes even clearer when we return to the fourth occurrence of the word in 1 John chapter 4. It goes like this: Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. For many false prophets have gone out into the world. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. And every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of Antichrist, which you heard was coming and now is in the world already. John again speaks about something his readers had heard was coming. But once again, he immediately says that it was already present. The spirit of Antichrist is in the world already. Here John moves behind the human teachers to the spiritual power animating their message. Antichrist is not only something that can be embodied by a person, John can also speak of the spirit of Antichrist operating through false teachers and through systems and structures of the world that oppose Christ. And once again, that spirit is identified by what it teaches about Jesus. John's churches were apparently confronting teachers who denied or distorted the reality that Jesus Christ had already come in the flesh. This was a first century heresy called Docetism. It held that Jesus was divine, but not really human. He only appeared to be a human. He only appeared to die, and thus he didn't need to be resurrected. Does that sound like the teaching concerning Jesus of another mainstream religion in the world today? Now, the term Docetism and what it proposes might sound crazy to us, but this became a widespread heresy that threatened the unity of the early church. That's why John says, test the spirits. The test is not how charismatic, knowledgeable, or spiritually impressive a teacher appears. The test is whether the person faithfully confesses Jesus as proclaimed by the apostles. That brings us to the fifth and final occurrence of the word Antichrist in 2 John verse 7. For many deceivers have gone out into the world, those who do not confess the coming of Jesus Christ in the flesh. Such a one is the deceiver and the antichrist. Notice how closely this parallels 1 John. There are many deceivers, but John says that each person who denies the truth about Jesus is the deceiver and the antichrist. Once again, this does not mean that every false teacher is simultaneously the one exclusive final antichrist. Doesn't mean that at all. It means that such a person embodies the kind of deception and opposition John identifies consistently as antichrist. And once again, the decisive issue centers on the incarnation. The eternal Son did not merely appear human, temporarily borrow a body, or descend upon an ordinary man for a period of time. Jesus Christ truly came in the flesh. John refuses to separate the earthly Jesus from the divine Son. This is also where we need to distinguish John's antichrist from some related biblical and historical categories. Jesus warned that false Christs and false prophets would arise. In the 2nd century, several decades after 1 John was written, Simon Bar Kokhba led a massive Jewish revolt against Rome. Rabbi Akiva and others regarded him as the promised Messiah. But Bar Kokhba was defeated. The revolt ended catastrophically, and his messianic claim proved false. Bar Kokhba is therefore a clear historic example of a false messianic claimant, a false Messiah. In the same way, Nero and Domitian and other Roman emperors like them can illuminate the New Testament's portrayal of a persecuting empire and a blasphemous political power. Think about the beast of Revelation 13, who represents the Roman Empire as a satanically empowered political power, embodied particularly in Nero and the imperial rulers who followed his pattern. But even though many people have tried to connect the beast with the Antichrist mentioned in John's letters, we shouldn't assume that the beast is a perfect template for what John had in mind. Christians often combine Daniel's little horn, Jesus' false Christ, Paul's man of lawlessness from the letter to the Thessalonians, Revelation's beast, and John's antichrist into one singular end times figure. There may be legitimate theological connections among these images. And I certainly think the New Testament leaves room for a final climactic enemy of Christ. But the Bible does not use all these terms interchangeably. Before we combine them into a larger eschatological or end times system, we need to allow each biblical writer to speak on his own terms. So, when John speaks about Antichrist, his primary concern is not that Christians identify one future political ruler. It's that they recognize the deception already at work around them. Many antichrists had gone out into the world at the time of John's writing. Teachers who denied that Jesus is the Christ, separated the Son from the Father, and rejected the truth that Jesus truly came in the flesh. That does not rule out a final climactic enemy of Christ, but it does remind us that the spirit of Antichrist is not merely a future threat. It is present wherever the apostolic truth about Jesus is distorted or denied, wherever the biblical truth about Jesus is distorted or denied. And John's answer is not fear, it's not sensationalism or endless speculation. It's simple. Let what you heard from the beginning abide in you. Know the true Christ, remain in his truth, and be faithful to him until the end.